I'm about to read The Ghost Woods by C.J. Cooke, and I'm excited about it. I bought this book, I think last month, and I recommended it to my haunted book club, and so this is the book that we'll be reading for June, so that's kind of exciting. And so yeah, I think the cover is really pretty, and I'm excited and of course scared. So from my understanding, this book follows along a woman named Pearl, and she is sent to this area to give birth. And it seems like a bunch of women are sent to this area to give birth, but when she arrives there, she feels like there's something not right about the area, and so she, a woman, and her son kind of start to investigate the area. And then it talked about like how there's like danger coming closer, and I don't know, maybe the trees are kind of like coming closer, I don't know. And that there's like a boy who's not really a boy, so maybe he's like a ghost, I don't know. But that's all I really know. So I don't know if it's like a psychological horror, if it's a paranormal horror, what kind of horror it could be, but I think that's part of the fun of it. So yeah, I'm hopefully I don't get nightmares from this, but I feel like we all know I will. But anyways, without further ado, let's crack this book right open. So I'm a little bit more than 100 pages into The Ghost Woods, and here are my thoughts so far. This book like instantly just sucked me into it to the point where I was like, wait, I need to pause so I can update you on where I'm at in this book, because the writing is just really captivating, and it just like, it hooks you, and there's like that whole mystery surrounding it. And honestly, like the beginning where there was just like this quote from like a different book, and then there was a quote from something else, and then there was like this kind of prologue that's really just set in the scene, and it makes me wonder, I think that this story is about witches and fae, believe it or not. And why I think that is because of those quotes at the beginning where we're kind of told this story about how this witch kind of owned this land, like these were her woods, and then there was a child who was switched with a changeling, and everybody blamed the witch, and so the witch had cursed everybody within that area. And so I think that that's kind of the story, because we have our two main characters. We have Mabel, who is kind of like in the past, those two timelines. There's like, I think it's like 15 years before, and then the 15 years after, where we follow Pearl. And so Mabel is interesting because we're introduced to her, and she's barely 17 years old, and she's pregnant, but she doesn't understand how. And we're also introduced to her in the way that she explains that there's ghosts in her body. There's ghost in her kneecap, ghost in her arms, ghost in her lungs, and then now a ghost baby is what she's calling it. And so she doesn't understand, how can you get pregnant without doing anything? But obviously no one believes her, and so she gets sent to this place, Lichen House, who basically unwed mothers can go there, have their baby, put the baby up for adoption. And so she goes there. And then in the present timeline, present as in like, it's like the, I think it's like, let me double check, I think it's like the 1960s-ish, we follow Pearl. And Pearl is also an unwed pregnant mother. And so unlike Mabel though, she knows who the father is, and so she goes off to this house to give birth to her baby. And so we're getting two different timelines, which is really interesting because the woman who owns the place, Ms. Whitlock, is very different when she's with Mabel versus this kind of timeline with Pearl, where she's more kind of like stern and angry and scared, whereas with Mabel's timeline, she's more sweet and kind and caring, but there's still a lot of secrets that she has. And so that's really interesting. And then the importance of mushrooms, because I feel like that's important, is that all the mushrooms from the forest are basically like infecting the house in the present timeline. And I think that's important not only because the cover has the mushrooms, but because Mr. Whitlock studied mushrooms and he now has dementia in the Pearl timeline. So I don't know, I think that there's something there. It kind of is given a bit more like a fantasy vibe, but like a fantasy horror, and honestly I dig that. So yeah, that's honestly pretty much where I'm at. We're just being introduced to these two timelines, going into the house and being kind of creeped out about what is in the woods, because one of the characters did see a mysterious boy who's about 5 years old who probably should not actually be there, and nobody knows who he is, and they all get kind of like tight-lipped about it. And then there's also a teenage boy, 14 years old, Wulfric, who is the grandson of Ms. Whitlock, and he's interesting too. And I think that he's the boy who it kind of talks as like a boy who's not quite a boy. I think he's a changeling, so we will see. I don't know, but I'm completely open to the idea of this being like a changeling witch story. I honestly was expecting a bit more like haunted house, but I like what I'm getting with this so far. So I'm going to continue to read the Ghost Woods, and I'll update you around the halfway mark, so I will see you then. So I'm now definitely more than halfway through the Ghost Woods, and maybe I misunderstand what horror is, because this doesn't feel like horror to me. It feels more like a literary fiction with a bit of mystery in it. I don't know, like when I think horror, I think like really, really creepy and scary, like a lot of the times, like with The Haunted of Hill House, that was definitely a horror book. But this one here, it doesn't really feel like horror. It feels, I don't know how to put it, but it definitely has a bit more of like a fantasy vibe to it, with all the lore about like the witch and the fairy wrens and the potential of changelings and that kind of stuff. So definitely not what I think in my head as horror. But it is still a good book. The chapters are really, really short. Sometimes they're like 1 page, 2 pages, but more often than not, they're about 4 to 5 pages. And so it's one of those books that I'm going through it really quickly because it's just like very well paced with very short chapters, that you're learning more and more about Mabel, and you're learning about Pearl as well, which for some reason I thought it was like a 15-year difference, but no, it's like a 5-year difference between the two stories. And so both of the timelines are starting to catch up now. Like Mabel's timeline is almost caught up to where Pearl is. So I think that that's going to be really cool to see like where that goes and fit in all of the missing pieces, because there is definitely something creepy in the Ghost Woods, which I'm assuming is probably that witch who had like cursed the people in that house many, many, many decades ago, probably centuries ago. And so it makes me wonder about like what's going on, because like Miss Whitlock, she does this kind of like ritual where she puts like fairy dust on all of the babies that are born there, and I don't really know why. I don't know if she's protecting them or if she's basically selling them off maybe to the witch or something. I don't know, but there was one creepy scene for sure where Pearl had gone into the woods and saw something, was like, oh my goodness, and like ran for her life and was scared it was gonna take over her skin. So yeah, that's creepy. But there's also a lot of mention about like these mushrooms, and there's an actual type of mushroom that can like possess an ant and make it like a zombie. And then it makes me think about The Last of Us, where it's like all of that like fungusy stuff that turns all the dead people into these zombies. So maybe there's some connection in that as well. So yeah, I'm honestly not really sure. Like I think this is definitely like a good book, and I'm definitely enjoying it, but I think it's not meeting the expectations, at least so far, of like going in expecting a horror. Like I was ready to be scared and I am not scared. And so yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm so unfamiliar with horror that maybe this is like a specific type of horror, like a subgenre that I'm not aware of. So please let me know, because I know there's like a paranormal horror, and there's like body horror and like other types of horror. So maybe this is something different. I don't know, but definitely lots of mysteries, especially with Wulfric and the young boy, and with Mabel and Pearl, and really the whole Lichen House area. So yeah, definitely curious to see where this goes. So I'm going to continue to read this book, and I'll update you when I finish it. So we'll see you then with my final thoughts.
It feels like funny. Yeah. That's how my ear.
So I just finished The Ghost Woods, and I feel like I don't know, like I feel really conflicted about this book, to be honest. I think that there were parts of it where it was just like got stuck and really, really slow, which is really strange because like most of this book was really well paced and was like kind of eerie and creepy, but I think like the horror vibe and like the big reveal was super predictable, and I feel like the characters didn't really investigate it. Everything just kind of like fell into place, and it was just wrapped up more neatly, I think, than what would be realistic. So like a little bit of a disappointment, to be honest, but on the stuff that I did like, I loved all of the characters. I thought that they were really well developed. I liked being able to follow along Mabel and follow along Pearl and how their timelines kind of like connected, and then how it's like this place in the middle of nowhere in Scotland where all of these women go to have babies, because in this timeline, like it was like horrible if you had a child before you were married. And so these women, they lost their jobs, they lost their families, they lose their babies, like everything about it is just like really devastating for them. And so they all just kind of stay in that area, or eventually they do leave. But yeah, it's really like it's an isolated kind of set-in for this book, which is good, and it's right near some like forest, which is creepy, and that's also good because that's like the vibe. But I think like the horror aspects of the book was just okay. I think I would have liked the horror aspects if it was more throughout the book instead of really just in that last part, because the beginning of this book, the setup is brilliant, really hooks you, you get all the creepiness, and then you're introduced to some characters. But I would say it's like around the middle, a little bit towards the end of the middle, where it's just kind of flat and there's not really too much happening, to be honest, and not much creepiness, where I'm like, is this a horror book? But then at the end, you get the horror, you get some body horror, like that kind of stuff. But I don't know, I felt like maybe this book was just too long. Like it didn't need to be this long. I think that there's a really great cast of characters and a really like intriguing setting, but the horror parts where I was really expecting this kind of like scary stuff to happen didn't really happen. And there was like a whole house, like this was like a big ancient house, and there was no haunted house vibe, which honestly I felt like that was going to be part of it. There's going to be like this haunted house, but no, the house is fine, outside is fine. It's just if you go deep into the woods, it gets a little bit creepy, but not really. But it did have some really cool Scottish folklore about the witch, whose name I cannot for the life of me pronounce. That was cool, with like how people had killed the fairy son, and then she's like, nah, this isn't like, I'm gonna curse you kind of stuff. It had some scientific aspects, like with Mr. Whitlock and how well versed he was in all types of fungi. That was really cool. And then just like some historical parts as well about like, this is what would happen to women when they ended up getting pregnant. And then also I was surprised, like pleasantly surprised, that there's some really great LGBTQ plus themes in this book. So good book to read during June, you know? So yeah, that stuff was good. And I think the book overall was decent, but I don't think it's like my favorite book that I've read. I think I expected more out of it, to be honest. So today we're going to be awarding The Ghost Woods a total of 3 stars. I think I would give this one a low 3 stars as well, where it's like it just barely hit 3 stars because I had way too high of expectations. I really did think this was going to be like a ghost, paranormal, haunted house, haunted woods horror story, and that's not what we got from this book. And so that's, I mean, when you have expectations, it is a little bit harder to be like, oh, you know, like a little bit hard to be forgiven when you think that it's going to be one thing and then it's not. And sometimes that's fine. But for me, I feel like the title of the book is misleading, to be honest. It's like, you see like this creepy looking boy in the woods, and it's like, yeah, like what is this? Like ghost woods? That's really cool. But that wasn't really the story of it, but like it had good messages. So I think it's one of those books that like, it had some good moments. It definitely had good moments that I'm gonna think about and be like, oh, you know, like, wow, I learned about this and these characters went through this, and the writing style is really good and the pacing is really good. I love how short the chapters are and just like how you can really go through it. But I do think that it was just a little bit longer than it needed to be, and the title's just misleading. Honestly, the misleading title I think is what got me, because I really did think that it was going to be a paranormal romance, but not really. I don't even really know what to classify this, and I mean, I'm not like a horror expert, but maybe it's just the thriller. I don't know. I don't know what you would classify this book as, but for me, this is not really horror. You get like some kind of scary stuff at the end, like the body horror stuff, but I don't think that's enough to call this a horror book. The next book that I'm going to be reading is Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. I have not heard anything bad about this book. It is a lot bigger though. It's a bit deceiving because it has these like really, really thin pages with really, really like small text. So even though it claims it's like basically 600 pages, I think it's honestly more than that. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. It's been a while since I've read a bigger book. So if you're interested in watching me read Binding 13 or any other book that happens to be on my never-ending TBR, definitely hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and turn on the bell notification. That way you get notified anytime a new video comes out. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the like button and let me know, what are some horror books that you would recommend to me that are kind of like more of the paranormal ghost stuff? Because I think that's what I'm really looking for in this kind of horror endeavor that we're going through. And one last thing for you before you go. If you've ever wanted to be part of an exclusive community where you can see videos before they're published, behind the scenes content, vote in polls, see what I'm gonna be reading before videos come out, what's on my TBR, and much, much more, you actually can by becoming a member of my channel. Doesn't matter what tier you pick, there are 3 of them that will give you more and more kind of like perks, and every single one of those all directly go toward me getting more books that we can read together on this channel. So if you're interested in becoming a member, all the information is in the description to this video. So with that, I'm going to wish you warm wishes and fish kisses, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!